Hi everyone, we have Mr. Tom Kamesh here from the Calgary Shepherd Member of Parliament, and he is the Shadow Minister for the Canadian Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship. I think we can get started with the questions.
Sure.
To kickstart our conversations, our first question towards you would be, sir, what is the biggest challenge, in your words, to the immigration policy at the moment?
Well, to me, there's two things, and they're equal importance. One is the huge immigration backlog. Lots of people have applications in the system that are taking a very long time to process. So the backlog right now is around 2.1 million application. This is a backlog that's been there since about 2015. It's gone up and down.
Yes.
I blame the Liberal government for it, obviously, because there was no backlog in 2015. The backlog grew in applications to about 2 million just before the pandemic, and then grew to 2.9 million during the pandemic. So one of the favorite things that the Liberal government keeps doing, it says, well, the backlog is just a pandemic result. And it's not. It's related to a series of decisions they have made that have delayed people's applications. So everybody now who's adding in a new application, they're just being added to the queue at the end, and so everybody has to wait their turn. Some people have been separated from their spouses for multiple years. Some people are waiting to bring in nannies, and they're waiting many, many years as well. And some people, like, I have some of the numbers just from 2019. Like, I'll give you a couple of examples. For example, if you are a federal skilled worker, it used to take 9 months to process your application, and now it's taking 27 months to process your application. If you were a Canadian experience class, it used to take 7 months, and now it's taking 5 months. So that one has actually gotten shorter by 2 months. But things like, spousal sponsorships, spouses, partners, and children's in a family class used to take 12 months. Now it's taking 39 months for a PR application. Parents, grandparents used to be 19 months. That one is now about 19 months as well. Sorry, 39 months as well. Family relations and H&C application now takes 19 months. And then, like, if you're a refugee to this country, used to take 15 months, now it takes 33 months. If you're a privately sponsored refugee, it was 23 months, now it's 38 months. So everything's gotten longer. Then the second half is foreign credential recognition. That's a really big deal. It affected my family when we came to Canada. My father wasn't able to practice as an engineer right away. So the company he worked for kept hiring a young person to sign off on all of his drawings. But we Conservatives have a proposal to do a Blue Seal program to copy what they do for Red Seal, so the skilled trades. That we think would resolve it. We have 32,000 nurses in Canada with international credentials. They can't practice their occupation or profession that they love. And 20,000 doctors can't practice their profession that they are trained in Canada, because these colleges at the provincial level are making it very difficult to have your license accepted and your credentials overseas accepted. So we want to expedite it, but those two things are the biggest problems, the backlog and the foreign credential recognition.
I understand. So for the foreign credential recognition, I understand that there's a blue seal that you suggest. With respect to the timeline or length of the immigration applications, how would you address those challenges?
So that is a question of, like, political administration of the department. So, like, people have to remember that in 2015, there was no immigration backlog whatsoever.
Yes.
This department has doubled its staff to 12,000 people since then. It has doubled the money that it used to have in 2015, and that backlog has only gotten worse. The only thing that has stayed the same since 2015 is the Liberals are in charge, and they don't take the immigration department seriously, because look, how many immigration ministers are we on now? Number 4 or number 5? You've almost have one minister for every single year that they've been in power. Maybe every 18 months they've been changing them. They don't take it seriously as putting in someone who's focused on administrating the department. That won't change until you have a change of government, and then the backlog can be taken seriously and actually reduced. So that's been the biggest problem, is that they're not making immigration a priority in terms of administration of the policies they have, and they keep creating sub-programs to the primary programs. And every time you do that, you're pulling people away. You're retraining them to apply eligibility criteria for a smaller program. And if you look at, back in September of last year, when you look at the TR to PR program, so that's a good example, is temporary residence to permanent residency. The government kept saying, we're going to process all these people from temporary status, we're going to make them permanent residents. That program has less than 20% processing time on time, which means 80% processed within the time window. It's so bad. I have tens of thousands of people who have been waiting years to get their permanent residency. They've made all the applications, and now they're left waiting for it. So that is a question of political will and administration. That's
yes.
that's the big problem there.
I understand. And you open me into the next question, that is the TR to PR. We haven't seen a federal skilled worker, the FSW draw, in a while. And this is, in fact, forcing a lot of our aspiring immigrants from India or whichever country it is that they want to move in. They're taking in the path of international students, coming here as an international student and then moving towards the permanent residency of achieving the Canadian dream. Now, this has increased the timeline, of course, to 5 years. Apart from that, it's also the amount of money that they're spending to do this. They're spending hundreds of thousands of rupees or whichever foreign currency it is, that to come here as a student, cope with the cost of living, shortage of housing, several other issues, and still working towards their permanent residency. And this is taking a long time. How do you think you would address those challenges?
So, I mean, the problem has gotten worse for international students because there used to be way less international students than there are today. So all of them are being put into a pool of people all competing for almost the same amount of permanent residency spots. Nobody tells them that at the beginning, at the front end. So I met a few international students just a few days ago at one of the local conservative EDA events, and they were telling me their story. And I asked them, like, did anybody tell you that one, you would be paying, double, triple, quadruple the rates because you're international students as opposed to domestic students here locally? They said, no, nobody told us that. They just told us that we'd be paying a lot more. Okay. They didn't tell us how high the cost of living is here, how expensive rent is when you come here. And I asked them specifically, did anybody tell you how many other international students are coming in, how many hundreds of thousands of international students there are now across Canada, and that the number of permanent residency spots is almost the same. Like, as a ratio, it used to be kind of, 2-for-1. The thought was international students would come here and not everybody would stay. Some would become permanent residents and then citizens, because some would have the type of training and there would be job opportunities, and some would take their knowledge back to their country of origin and they would then apply it there. They say, well, I have Canadian experience, which from a Canadian university or post-secondary would be looked after really favorably. But now it's become the go-to for many people to immigrate to Canada because everything else is backlogged, so it takes a longer time, like you said, to get into Canada, but you're paying huge dollars to get in, to get this done. Like, there is no easy solution to this, and it's resetting people's expectations. We have, I count between 1.2 and 1.4 million people here in Canada on a temporary status of some sort. Visitors, international students, temporary foreign workers of whatever variety and whatever program you're in. That wasn't the case back in 2015. You had way less temporary status individuals here, but the number of permanent resident spots available are almost the same. Like, they've kind of tracked up a little bit in terms of the targets that the minister has. Many of those have gone to provincial nominee programs, and the provinces are very tough on the types of occupations they're looking for work. None of that is communicated to people when they pick their area of study. So nobody's telling them, like, we're desperate for truck drivers, we're desperate for personal support workers, nurses, aides, we need teachers and teaching aides. But if you take, say, an engineering degree at a university here in Canada, nobody told you that there's not a lack of, at least back home in Calgary, there's no lack of engineers. There's a lot of engineers from a lot of places, and I hear that from my engineers from especially Chennai, and they complain to me that why are people coming in from outside the country to compete for the job that they had here, but now they're out of a job, and then when they're rehiring, now they're competing with these internationally trained, well, actually domestically trained, but former international students who are applying for postgraduate work permits. They're now competing in the same market, and sometimes they come from the same hometown I do, like in Chennai. And Chennai's the one example I have because I know exactly a couple of guys who have this exact experience, and it's extra competition for them. But if we had told them, listen, we need truck drivers, we need doctors, we need nurses, they would get jobs here almost automatically. If it wasn't, the other problem that we have is these colleges are stopping these people being trained. And here in Canada, it's very difficult to get into a medical school or a nursing school right now. So, I mean, there's a lot of series of problems, and I was telling people it's a journey. So if we don't get it right at the front end, if we give you false hope, and then kind of track you along, that's why it's like less than half of people are saying that they want to stay in Canada now that they're here, and less than half of people who become permanent residents actually apply for Canadian citizenship. Like, the numbers are way down. It used to be about 75 to 80% of permanent residents become Canadian citizens. Now it's less than 50% since 2015. The only thing that's changed since then is the Liberal government has been in charge.
I understand. How would you address the challenges faced by the international students, particularly with respect to the number of hours that they are allowed to work? Previously, it was 20 hours a week. Then it was bumped up to 40 hours a week during the pandemic, and now it has gone back to 20 hours a week. How would you address these challenges?
So my understanding is I've been asked this question before at another Maya Alam event that I went to. There's two things. So one, international students know their schedule the best, right? So to me, when the government increased it from 20 hours to 40 hours, my understanding was and my hope was that they would prioritize their studies over their work. But at the same time, they also need to pay for, the cost of living is impacting them just like every other Canadian. They need to pay rent, they need to pay for food, groceries, transit, and everything else that's required, to live here in Canada. We know life has gotten way more expensive in the last few years as the government spent an incredible amount of money, and that's caused mass inflation for our groceries, for transit fees, for rentals, all that stuff. So I thought that it was a reasonable thing to do to increase the number of hours you can work. It also gives you more options for the types of jobs that you can do, as long as employers weren't then forcing international students to take on more hours than they would be able to do in a regular study week. Because, like, I remember being a master's student, I remember doing my studies. I could not do a 40-hour work week and a full week of studying as well. So the government now, though, my understanding is there's like two types of international students. Those who are already here would have, the ability to work for 40 hours, and new international students can only work 20 hours. That needs to be made clear to them, like the actual cost of living once you come to Canada. They have school fees to pay. They pay much more than students who are domestic to Canada. So there's a huge disparity between the two. And I know that there's something we all need to kind of recognize. There's also quite a bit of fraud going on, from my understanding, with international students being promised positions to study at colleges, private colleges, post-secondaries that sometimes don't exist. There are fraudulent applications that are being put into place. And second of all, the hope for a permanent residency spot, I think, is something that many international students have. We need to be honest with them that they're going to be competing against other international students, and there's a lot more of them than there ever used to be. And what I don't want the government to be doing, and employers should not be pushing the government into this, making international students into a new stream of immigration just to fill work spots, just to fill labor market needs. They're coming here to study first and work second, not work first and study second. Their studies should be the priority always. And a conservative government, we will make sure that the focus is on studying first and work if it's needed, to pay for the cost of living here, not as a source of labor for employers.
Understand.